So someone I know well, Velma McColl, is a principal with Earnscliffe Strategy Group and someone who writes a lot of smart papers that she has me read, so I have a modicum of intelligence when I talk about this kind of stuff on television. She served as a senior policy and communication advisor to federal cabinet ministers across portfolios from industry to the environment to health and fisheries and oceans. She's really been on the cutting edge of policy discussions about climate change and regional economic development and competitiveness. And one of the key things, and Ralph kind of mentioned it when you talk about the regulatory approach, one of the challenges is really synthesizing regulations that cross the provincial, federal, and territorial and international boundaries. And Velma's got a lot of experience trying to bridge those gaps, and believe me, sometimes the gaps look more like canyons. So without further ado, let me welcome Velma.
Ralph's given you a great background, a great context and a frame. I think you may hear a few points repeated in what I'm going to say, and you have three great panelists after me who are going to get in deeper in some of the issues. So I just want to touch on a few things related to Canada's uniqueness. The first is in the diversity and depth of our energy assets, both in how we have currently deployed them and in the opportunities that lie ahead of us. We have a wide range of energy assets, and in fact, each province has core energy sources and comparative advantages. We don't always look at that as something we should be proud of. We tend to look at it as something that further balkanizes us, Alberta versus Quebec, or hydro-producing power provinces versus natural gas and oil-producing provinces. But it's there. We also have great opportunities for diversification, biomass, solar, wind, and we're going to get into that debate. The energy mixes are shifting. I think we can honestly look across each jurisdiction and say that they're shifting currently, but they need to go further, and we need to look at this issue out over decades, not years or political terms, and all regions of the country need to diversify. The other thing that's an advantage for Canada is that we are an energy exporting nation. We export traditional forms of energy, and as Ralph was saying, in terms of commodities, we export oil, natural gas, uranium, etc., mostly to the US, but we also export and have a very strong integration with the US on electricity. And I think sometimes we forget some of those basic facts. The other thing that's worth mentioning, the only point that I'll add to what Ralph listed, is that we are also a democratic and secure nation exporting energy. And I don't think we should underestimate the value of that in a global conversation. Another unique quality for Canada that I'd list would be that our proximity and integration with the US and in North America. The majority of our energy exports are to the US. It's going to be that way for a long time. There are parts of the country and various interests who are talking about diversification of where we're exporting our energy, but it is largely to the US. We as Canadians sometimes have a hard time with how close or how far do we want to be from the US, but I think we can't avoid on the energy conversation the fact that we're already integrated. We have more energy that flows north-south than flows east-west, and I think some of my other panelists are going to talk about that. The final point I'll make in terms of what's unique for us is how energy in our history and our experience as energy innovators creates opportunities for us in clean tech, and I define clean tech broadly as across our natural resource sectors, in addition to renewables, changes in industrial processes, new technologies, energy efficiency, things that would be seen as a change or moving away from natural resources to something else. I take a fairly broad, encompassing view of energy innovation. I think we've got a burgeoning clean tech sector. I think we've got a number of Canadians who've gone away, who've gathered a lot of international experience in the clean tech sector, who've learned what's happening globally, and who can bring that home. And I think we have an opportunity there, but the question is whether we're going to create winning conditions to capitalize on that. The second thing I like to do is talk about a couple of challenges, because I think it's unique, and I think we've got opportunities, but I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the challenges that we're facing. First, I think that we're quite naive in understanding the scale and pace of change globally in energy systems and technology. If you look at what's happening in China, in particular, India, the US, the Middle East, et in systems that are different and who are taking exponential change approaches to energy, we still tend to be in a very linear conversation. We have a federal debate about this. We have provincial positions. We mark this up in balkanized conversations. But in China, they can just decide that they're going to build 20 high-speed rail systems, and they're built. They don't have the same level of regulatory processes. They don't have the same jurisdictional issues, et cetera. And I think that, in Canada, we've got to wake up to the fact that the pace of change globally is starting to affect our competitiveness and our long-term energy future. So the other point that I'll make about this is increasingly energy is a global trade and competitiveness issue. I was at the climate change negotiations in Copenhagen. You can say what you want about the outcome of those, but the one thing that I came away from that conversation with was the extent to which the dialogue between China and the US and the other major players, the basic countries, et cetera, is that the motivator, the driver, if there's going to be any kind of global agreement or even regional agreements on this, it's largely motivated by trade.